name is Kristen McMahon, and I have the pleasure of serving as the new president for the Robert H. Jackson Center, and I am very excited to be here. This is my first year observing and participating in the roundtable, and I can't be more thrilled. I'm looking forward to sitting with you all and learning from you and participating in that discussion. This evening would not be possible without the generous support of Case Western Reserve University School of Law, the Chautauqua Institution, Labella Architects, Blackstone Ney Ultrasonics, and the Whitney R. Harris Lectureship Endowment Fund at the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation, and of course, all of you in the audience. I have the distinct honor to introduce the Joshua Heinz Award for Humanitarian Achievement, which honors those who demonstrate compassion, vision, and dedication in pursuit of international humanitarian justice. The EU Reporter has called it one of the world's most prestigious individual achievement prizes. Joshua Heinz, the benefactor of this award, previously served on the board of the Jackson Center, as a trustee of Syracuse University, and as the former chair of the Syracuse University College of Law Board of Advisors. He is passionate about creating avenues for institutions of higher education to serve their communities. Joshua, would you please join me?
Good evening. I find this always to be sort of an emotional thing for me. We started this, David Crane and I don't know, 13 years ago or thereabouts. And at that time we described, I was really sort of overwhelmed by the three Nuremberg prosecutors, Whitney Harris, Ben Ferencz, and Bill Kaming. I thought, how can these people have done so much for all of us? And I thought that we ought to recognize them. So that's the beginning of the Heinz Humanitarian Award, and I'm pleased and honored to actually stand before you and to welcome Irwin tonight to receive the award. So thank you all for sustaining this together with my family and me and my wife. And I look forward to continuing for many years. Thank you.
So as Mr. Heinz said, this year's recipient of the Joshua Heinz Humanitarian Achievement Award is the Honorable Irwin Cotler. Mr. Cotler is the chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights and an emeritus professor of law at McGill University. He previously served as Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, a longtime member of Parliament, and as an international human rights attorney. During his tenure as Minister of Justice and Attorney General, Mr. Cotler appointed the first ever Aboriginal and visible minority justices to the Ontario Court of Appeal. He initiated the first comprehensive reform of the Supreme Court appointment process and helped to make it the most gender representative Supreme Court in the world. He crafted the Civil Marriage Act, the first legislation to grant marriage equality to gays and lesbians, initiated the first law on human trafficking, and issued Canada's first National Justice Initiative against racism and hate. He also made the pursuit of international justice a Canadian government priority. Mr. Cotler has served as the chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Group for Human Rights in Iran, chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Group of Justice for Sergei Magnitsky, chair of the All-Party Save Darfur Parliamentary Coalition, chair of the Canadian section of the Parliamentarians for Global Action, and a member of its International Council. As an international human rights lawyer, he has been called the Counsel for the Oppressed, which was described in Maclean's, Canada's national current affairs and news magazine. He has come to the aid of several prisoners of conscience, including Andrei Sakharov, Russian nuclear physicist and Nobel laureate, and Natan Sharansky, Soviet-Israeli politician and author, Nelson Mandela, Jacobo Timerman, an Argentinian publisher, journalist, and author, and Professor Saad Eddin Ibrahim, an Egyptian professor of sociology at the American University of Cairo. As an aside, I did a lot of Googling over the last several days on how to pronounce all of those. Mr. Cotler chaired the International Commission of Inquiry into the fate and whereabouts of Raoul Wallenberg. He was a member of the international legal team of Chinese Nobel Peace Laureate Liu Xiaobo. More recently, the Raoul Wallenberg Center has acted as the international legal counsel for Raif Badawi, a Saudi writer, dissident, and blogger. His other awards include the Canadian Bar Association's President's Award, the International Raoul Wallenberg Foundation's Centennial Medal, the Romeo Dallaire Award for Human Rights Leadership, the Sir Zafrullah Khan Award for Distinguished Public Service, and the Dalhousie University Ethical Leadership Award, as well as the Sergei Magnitsky Human Rights Award for outstanding contributions to the Global Magnitsky Campaign. And Mr. Magnitsky himself was posthumously awarded the Heinz Award in 2015. I'd like to re-invite Mr. Heinz to the podium and Mr. Cotler.
Are we ready?
Would you like to say a few words?
May I begin by expressing my appreciation to the Joshua Jackson Center and to Joshua Heinz for establishing this award. I have to say that I'm very moved and humbled in receiving it. I take it to be really in recognition of the cases and causes that I've had the honor to be engaged with, and the political prisoners that I've had the privilege to be involved in their pursuit of justice. And in fact, that's what our Raoul Wallenberg Center is all about, the pursuit of justice. And it is really an inspiring moment for me to be amongst those here in this audience, each and all of whom have contributed so much over the years and continue to contribute to the compelling objective of the pursuit of justice in our time. You know, I was reminded as I was coming down here today, we're meeting really on the occasion of what is in effect the 25th anniversary of the genocide of the Tutsis in Rwanda. And what makes that genocide so unspeakable is not only the horror of the genocide itself. That would be bad enough. What makes it so unspeakable is that that genocide was preventable. Nobody could say we did not know. We knew, but we did not act. Just as in Darfur, we knew and did not act. And in Syria, where we are still witnessing the greatest humanitarian catastrophic fallout since the end of the Second World War, here too, we could not say we did not know. We knew, did not act, and are still not acting as bombs fall as we meet in Idlib in Syria. And as it happens, today is the second anniversary of the genocide of the Rohingya of Myanmar. And here too, one can't say we did not know. I recall when I was a member of Parliament some 6 years ago, convened a Foreign Affairs Committee to look into what was happening in Myanmar. And we spoke about the prospective ethnic cleansing. All the indicators were there. And so we called a press conference, and not one journalist came. And in the parliamentary halls afterwards, I bumped into a number of the journalists, and I said, you know, we had this press conference. Oh, they said, oh, yeah, something about Ringi. Sorry, we couldn't be there because there have been some allegations about sexual impropriety of some of your colleagues, so that took us away from anything else. I said, I always thought that you guys could walk and chew gum at the same time. And so silence engulfed what was happening with the Rohingya then, and that took us again down tragically to the genocide, whose second anniversary we are now commemorating, and where the Rohingya wish desperately to be able to return to their homeland. But what is so desperately needed is a protected return to a protected homeland where they can have citizenship. And if I may, I just want to close by just mentioning something about political prisoners. Because Raif Badawi, the imprisoned Saudi blogger, is now languishing into his 8th year of imprisonment for saying some 7 years ago what the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman started to say last year. His sister, Samar Badawi, was imprisoned for calling for the right of Saudi women to drive, and this after Mohammed bin Salman instituted the right to drive. And she remains in prison, almost effectively as a disappeared person with reports of her having been tortured in prison. And there is also Walid Abu Qadir, the lawyer for Raif Badawi, who has almost been forgotten. I'm delighted the American Bar Association conferred their Human Rights Award on him 10 days ago, because he was sentenced to 15 years of imprisonment for representing Badawi, who then went unrepresented at the trial itself, in which he was tried and convicted, and sentenced also to 1,000 lashes, of which only 50 were administered because of the international outcry. I mentioned this because a year ago, almost the day that we were meeting, the then Foreign Minister and still Foreign Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, tweeted a call for the release of Raif Badawi and Samar Badawi. I should mention that Raif Badawi's wife and 3 children came as refugees to Canada. They're citizens of Canada. They reside in Quebec. After she called for their release, Saudi Arabian authorities erupted in fury. They ejected the Canadian ambassador to Saudi Arabia. They recalled their own ambassador to Canada. They suspended all trade and investment with Canada. And they recalled 15,000 Saudi students studying in Canada, including senior fellows in medicine. In effect, a self-defeating move, because these senior fellows and medical research fellows could only be benefiting the Saudi people on their return. But what happened afterwards, and that's why I'm telling this story, which is so disturbing, is not one democracy came to Canada's defense. Yes, civil society NGOs came. Yes, press wrote about it. But not one democracy came to Canada's defense. 2 months later, we witnessed the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi, Saudi Arabian journalist. I felt then and wrote at the time that the road to the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi began with the silence of the democracies in response to the call for the release of the Badawis, and the Saudis erupting in fury, and the democracies being silenced. Fortunately, though, as a result of a tragic, brutal murder, there was a wake-up call for a time with regard to holding Saudi Arabia accountable. But as we meet, and not long ago, Saudi Arabia was awarded the chairmanship of the G20. It's one thing not to hold Saudi Arabia sufficiently accountable. It's another thing to reward impunity. We have launched last week an international campaign for the release of the Badawis and their lawyer. And our hope is that this campaign will be joined in by the community of democracies, by the international legal community and the like. and not only with regard to Badawi, but also with regard to other political prisoners we happen to be involved with in Iran, in Venezuela, in China, and Russia, because we are witnessing two things: a resurgent global authoritarianism in which these political prisoners, the pain and plight of these political prisoners, are a looking glass into this resurgent global authoritarianism, and regrettably, the retreat of democracies at the same time. And so it's a special pleasure and privilege to be amongst those who are at the forefront of the pursuit of justice, who are underpinning the advocacy of the community of democracies, who are combating the impunity and the resurgent global authoritarianism, and that are helping to bring about the release of these great heroic political prisoners whose struggle is for our common humanity and our shared case and cause. Thank you.
So sorry about that.